Haunting of Black Shuck. In the picturesque county of Norfolk, England, in the year 1652, a tale of horror and mystery unfolded that would haunt the residents for centuries to come. A group of 6 boisterous men who shared the bond of friendship sought their evening merriment in the quiet town of Wymondham. As dusk approached, the men left the warm embrace of the local alehouse, hearts beating with excitement, and ventured into the heart of the town. They were a merry band. Each man was strong, brave, and carefree, believing that they were invincible. The darkness of the night seemed to beckon them, promising adventure and laughter. Little did they know that they would soon be forced to confront their deepest fears. As they made their way through the dimly lit streets, the men stumbled upon an old and twisted oak tree, a landmark known to the townsfolk as a place of ancient folklore. It was said that the devil himself had danced beneath its boughs, casting shadows of malevolence upon the land. The men, however, were undeterred by superstition and decided to make merry under the oak, mocking the legends as childish tales. As they reveled in their folly, a sinister wind began to howl through the branches of the oak, chilling their bones and casting shadows upon the ground. The once joyous atmosphere was suddenly tainted by an inexplicable sense of dread. The men exchanged glances, each trying to dismiss the unease that had befallen them. It was then that they heard it, a distant growl, echoing through the night like a harbinger of doom. A monstrous creature materialized from the darkness, eyes glowing with an unnatural fire. Its fur was as black as coal, and its enormous paws bore razor-sharp claws that tore into the earth. The beast stood tall, the very embodiment of terror, its breath a foul, suffocating mist. The men, rooted to the spot by a sudden terror, gazed upon the creature in horror. They knew what it was. The dreaded Black Shuck, a legendary hellhound said to be a harbinger of death. Its presence struck terror into the hearts of even the bravest men, for it was believed that if one were to look into its fiery eyes, they would be cursed with a terrible fate. One by one, the men locked eyes with the beast, their terror overwhelming them. Each man saw his own impending doom reflected in the monster's fiery gaze, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that their deaths were sealed. All, that is, except for one. Thomas Barker, the youngest of the group, had turned away at the last moment, unable to bear the sight of the hellhound. He had heard the legends and believed them to be true, and in that instant, he knew that his friends were doomed. But Thomas could not bring himself to face the Black Shuck, and so he averted his gaze, praying for salvation. As quickly as the monstrous creature had appeared, it vanished into the night, leaving the men trembling in its wake. They knew, deep in their hearts, that they had been cursed by the Black Shuck, and that their lives would never be the same again. Over the next year, the once lively group of men began to suffer the effects of their encounter with the Black Shuck. Each man, in turn, was struck down by a gruesome and inexplicable disease, their bodies racked with pain and suffering. First, it was George, the strongest of the group, who succumbed to a fever that burned through his body, reducing him to a shell of his former self. Then, Edward, the group's jester, fell victim to a mysterious illness that robbed him of his voice, leaving him to die in silence, his laughter forever silenced. William, the most knowledgeable of the group, was next to suffer. He was struck blind by an inexplicable malady, his eyes clouded and useless. He wandered in the darkness until his body gave out, leaving him to perish alone in his misery. Richard, the loyal friend, began to develop sores and blisters all over his body, each more painful than the last. The townsfolk shunned him, fearing that his affliction was contagious. He passed away in isolation, tormented by his disfigurement. Finally, the courageous leader of the group, John, was beset by a terrible wasting disease. His once muscular frame withered away, leaving him frail and weak. He spent his final days confined to his bed, a mere shadow of his former self. Throughout this terrible ordeal, Thomas Barker remained untouched by the curse that had befallen his friends. He watched in despair as each man succumbed to his fate, powerless to help them. Thomas's heart was heavy with guilt, for he knew that his friend's suffering was a direct result of their encounter with the Black Shuck, and he alone had been spared because he had not looked into the beast's eyes. As the year drew to a close, Thomas found himself the sole survivor of that fateful night. His life had become a lonely existence, haunted by the memories of his friends and their tragic ends. He was a man marked by sorrow, tormented by the knowledge that he had escaped the curse that had claimed the lives of his closest companions. But the legend of the Black Shuck had not finished with Thomas Barker. One stormy night, as Thomas walked the desolate streets of Wymondham, he heard the distant growl of the hellhound once more. The beast materialized before him, its fiery eyes burning with an unholy light. Thomas knew that the Black Shuck had returned for him, and in that moment, he decided to face the creature, no longer afraid of the fate that awaited him. He stared into the monster's eyes, his heart filled with a strange sense of peace. He knew that his time had come, and he was ready to accept the consequences of that long-ago night beneath the twisted oak. As the legend foretold, Thomas Barker was struck down by a terrible disease, his body racked with pain and suffering. And as he lay on his deathbed, he made peace with his fate, knowing that he would soon be reunited with his friends in the great beyond. The haunting tale of the Black Shuck and the 6 friends spread throughout Norfolk, a chilling reminder of the power of ancient legends and the consequences of tempting fate. To this day, the story is whispered in hushed tones, a cautionary tale to those who dare to venture beneath the boughs of the twisted oak, where the shadow of the Black Shuck still lingers. When you subscribe, be sure to click the notification bell. Click here for more true scary stories.